good for him. Boulder is beautiful, I'm told. I haven't made it there yet.
It's really nice. I only went there, like briefly to work with him, but that's actually the reason why he lived there, because he loves hiking on weekends. And yeah, Colorado is probably the best place for that.
Yeah, cool. Where are you?
I'm in Miami now. So I'm from Germany originally, but then I was in first at Yale, then New York SF, and then during the pandemic, like a lot of people from New York or SF ended up in Miami, so did I, and I stayed here.
Yeah, that's cool. It sounds like there's a pretty significant crypto community in Miami as well.
That's right, and actually, like this week in particular, Bitcoin 2023 is going on, so like all the entire crypto world, if you will, is here. And in general, like a lot of people, also because of like tax laws and just like a little bit less issues with regulation and such are here.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, nice.
Uh,
Cool.
hey, Huddle, welcome.
How's it going? Um, do you so quickly? Do you have like a specific agenda or what you would like to discuss, or how do you guys normally do those AMAs? From my side, it's very flexible. Let's say.
Cool. Yeah, we're equally flexible. I mean, I've read your docs. What I usually do is go through. I kind of open us up with an intro where I read your value prop from your docs. Then I ask you for your background and to talk about the team and how you all came together and tell the founding story. Why are you here? Then we'll go into the product, what you're solving for in terms of market and competitive opportunity, and then from there into what the product does, how it does it. I'm going to ask you how you're building, how you plan to build your data engine, for instance. I think is going to be a really interesting one. And then we'll get into to security, governance, and tokenomics, and then roadmap, and upcoming marketing.
Lovely,
things.
Nice, man. You guys are more thorough than some of the angels we're talking to. I love this.
Oh, funny! Thanks. Yeah, actually, my background is as a management consultant and a tech analyst, and briefly as a VC, where I led the analysis practice.
Where did you work as a consultant?
Nowhere, actually. I've been mostly self-employed. I briefly worked for Chaotic Moon.
Okay.
I guess that would be the only one that anyone might have heard of.
Okay. Nice, awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting background.
Yeah, so that's it. It's funny because the fundamentals and competitive value and so forth have so little to do with how things actually work in DeFi, right? That if anything, it's a disadvantage for me as an investor.
It's interesting because we're already kind of getting almost into the story, but this is a little bit like how AlphaScan came about, right? Because I was at BCG for 5 years, and I was very, I invested like in a few, let's say, startups, early stage, right? Like through AngelList and things like that. But everything kind of like what you say, right? Very fundamentals driven, right? Like, is this a real thing, etc. And then you go into Web3 and it's like, okay, who's shilling the hardest, right? Shill me harder and I'll believe in the product more. And it's very interesting how, this is still oftentimes seen, but at the same time, what I find very interesting is how things are changing now, right? I first heard of Bitcoin in 2011, and since then, the space has evolved a lot, right? And especially since the FTX collapse, people started paying much more attention to kind of, is this actually something or just selling me some, smoke, essentially?
Right. I think there definitely is a segment that pays a lot more attention, but then like we have Pepe.
Yeah. So and this gets us already like super deep into AlphaScan, right? But exactly what we saw now with Pepe is why I want to build AlphaScan, because I don't know when you first started going into this space, but I feel there's like certain ways this space moves when you zoom out, right? Like you have certain sectors or like narratives or verticals, whatever you want to call them, that just end up being big. And one of them is definitely, right, like meme coins or, hardcore, very obviously utility-free stuff that people just buy, quote unquote, for the culture, for a quick buck or whatever, right? But I think when you zoom out, a lot of these things actually follow certain trends. And this is kind of why we were doing AlphaScan, because I do believe that you can identify these trends. At least, you can't say 100% what's happening, right? Because if everybody believes in the same thing, then, if it's just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? But I do think there's certain things that paying attention what's happening on chain or in socials, especially on Twitter, gives a clear indication to some of these things. But yes, Pepe as well.
Yeah, no, and I think you're exactly right. And I think you actually describe it really well in your docs that that's exactly the difference between TradFi and DeFi is that every signal just about is available here, though, of course, there can be stuff going on in private chats and places like that. The fundamentally, you can almost achieve information parity here, but you need automation to keep up with the volume of signal, right? My problem as one of the principles of an alpha server isn't that I don't have enough alpha, it's that I can't keep track of all the alpha.
Yeah. And I'm actually very curious to understand also like how you guys kind of find alpha or track alpha, right? Because I'm part of a couple of different alpha groups. Like probably the one that is generally better known as like Fungi Alpha. And I every time I join a new one, I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm gonna like get X-ray vision into the market. It's typically not like that. I think at the end of the day, people are guessing everywhere quite a lot, right? The only question is, do you have sometimes groups where you can have like self-starters in there, right? For example, my friend launched with a couple of others like a meme token through a platform. It was like fully doxed, right? Like it wasn't like a scam or anything like that. I don't think it actually worked out, but it was fully transparent who the founders are, what they're doing with it, etc. Right? And so, but I think in a lot of these groups, at the end of the day, there's a lot of second guessing happening. Everybody's trying to just like one up each other. I don't know what your experience has been with this and finding alpha.
Yeah, I mean that's a good description. And certainly it depends on what sort of alpha. But if you're but for the people focused on minute to minute trading, shitcoins, and things like that, which is a lot of what I do as well or have done. Yeah, that's exactly it. Everybody's guessing. Right. I mean, sometimes you actually get some legit alpha that so and so who's connected to such and such is launching this thing. But otherwise it's everybody just going, oh look, I found this thing, quick, help me research it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's and it's the difference between being able to research it and determine if it's good in 15 seconds to 90 seconds or whether it takes you 5 minutes, and that's the difference between a 50x and a 2x.
Yeah. So actually, out of curiosity, how do you guys typically go about your own research right now? Like, what type of tools do you use? Like, do you how do you find alpha?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still kind of up in the air about what I'm using. I'm testing a bunch of different alpha seeking tools. I'm talking to some developers about potentially building our own stuff. Right. I'm kind of exploring all the different paths. And and what I've found is that there are a lot of things that have the information, but they are discrete from the things that enable you to take action on the information. Right. There seems to be a siloing of automation tools from data tools. And the result of that is that, I kind of continue to have the same problem where, yes, I could go spray, 0.02 ETH at a zillion things with a sniper bot, or I can carefully, find the next gem. But I can't connect those things in any meaningful way.
Interesting. Okay. And so if you don't mind, I'm actually very curious because this actually helps us, because I have a specific way of how I think about alpha, but I always see that everybody that does it slightly differently, right? And so when you, let's say you're looking for alpha, are you looking for like a 5x return? Are you looking for, let's say outperforming Bitcoin at like 2 to 10x? Or are you looking at, okay, like kind of more the spray and pray where you're willing to buy hundreds of positions and then one of them goes like 100,000x, right? And that covers essentially, the VC approach just on steroids.
Exactly. That's what I've been focused on, is the VC approach, but on steroids, because that's kind of what I see as the primary value here, right? For from the investor side, is the ability to do that, to think, and granted, I haven't exercised any portfolio level risk management as I've done that, so I've gotten wrecked.
I hear you. I'm the same. It doesn't matter what strategy. But because this is interesting, right? Because so what you're saying is, okay, you want to be extremely early in the next Pepper, in the next Turbo. You name the shitcoin, right? Whatever it is. When it's like, probably ideally sub 1 million or half a million, right? But even maybe sub 2 to 3 million, right? So if it goes to like half a million, you still have like orders of magnitude upside. That's kind of what you're looking at.
Right, and ideally even earlier. I mean, I'm often looking at at shit coins as they launch, and so looking at getting in in the sub 50K range, ideally. Which of course a lot of them are going to go to zero at that point. And a lot of the time you're looking at getting in before they've locked LP, before they've renounced, things like that, right? And taking really unnecessary risks.
Yeah.
But it does seem like, certainly from what I have seen, the upside tends to justify the risk, provided you don't run out of money before you catch one.
Yes, I'm 100% with you. And then, so this is super interesting. And internally, we were discussing with the team quite a bit, kind of where to, what to focus on. Because with AlphaScan, if I'm being honest, so we're actually right now, I had a call with my co-founder earlier. We're exploring a little bit more like sentiment analytics on the like super, super early side, right? Like before you kind of know anything. And there's very little signal, but I think, all you want to do is improve your signal to noise ratio, right? And then you have a couple of data points, and that could be a good helping point. But I think in general, what we've been focused on with AlphaScan so far is, okay, Pendle might do well because it's a really good product and the right people are starting to talk about it, right? Or Vela did like a 30x or 20x, I don't know where the price is exactly right now, but already like, order of magnitude change, right, since its launch. And the right people were talking about it, and then you get very good attention through that, right? So I think we've been focused so far more on this. Now, with meme coin season, upon us, or maybe it's left now again, but the last few weeks, right? I think there was a lot of shift exactly to what you're saying, right? Like sitting on DexScreen or DexTool or whatever your tool is, seeing what is launching, what is getting attention, and getting in really, really early, right? And I think it's essentially impossible to look at some of the stuff that we're doing right now because nobody knows about the token yet, right? By the time somebody like a big account talks about it on Twitter, the market cap is at least $500,000 or $1 million, right? So you're at the very, very early stages. But I've been seeing this more and more. And so this is super fascinating that you guys are going into this. Yeah, really happy to hear that.
Well, it seems like you're actually going to enable what for me would be the biggest value in this area, right? If I could simply take all of the people I'm following on Twitter that are relevant to this, all the callers of varying categories, categorize them, right, into, who is somebody that I want to follow, who is somebody that I want to take as a top signal, right? 3 or 4 categories of callers, and then having some automated notifications based on, what they tweet that wasn't too spammy. I mean, right? That would, if particularly then you could do the same thing in Telegram, right? And particularly if you could access, which you could, would be trivial technically, right? Private Telegram groups, and keep the output of this, again, private, because people aren't going to want to share their lists of callers with the broad world. They would, right, to an extent, but nobody's going to give the alpha, right, to the whole wide world.
Yep. So, it's very funny because what you just described is kind of what we're doing with AlphaScan, right? Like we started with Twitter because that's the most obvious one to go to, and the data has been, well, now the data is actually challenging, and you had a question around that, which is a very interesting question, I can tell you. But still, in general, Twitter is the easiest one, right? To just like get programmatically and like scale that. But this is one reason why we're looking at a decentralized solution, right? Because there's a lot of different places where you can find alpha, especially Telegram, Discord groups, but then even like YouTube, TikTok, etc. And having all of these things consolidated, and then exactly what you're saying, right? Set specific alerts where you can, kind of mirror what you're doing on actual socials in the tool, right, to use them for different signals, but then also get these kind of alerts, right? Because so we want to have an alert system where, for example, you say, okay, give me any Arbitrum narrative token, right? Like if it's below 10 million market cap or 5 million market cap, and 5 of these influencers have spoken about it, right? Or there's been 10 mentions across like relevant influence accounts, right? These kind of signals, I think, are going to be really, really big for people to go into positions, especially once, like it's very clear, okay, we are in another bull market. It's not just going to go down anymore. So like literally what you're saying is where we're going with the tool.
Yeah, I love it. Super exciting. Particularly, then you could go the next step, and then can I set up rules, right, and buy things based on this information.
Yes. So this is exactly. So the first part is going to be just alerts, right? And the second part is we're working on a DeFi solution. Well, we will have a DeFi solution where you can then execute trades automatically, right? Or we could have even like a middleman. Sorry, not a middleman, but like an extra step where we say, okay, I have these rules, right? Send them to my Telegram. Send me an alert. But also you can just respond in Telegram, yes, trigger the buy, right? If you already have, let's say, like money in a smart contract, right? You can either have it fully automated or you have this additional manual step. So this is literally exactly why I start working on AlphaScan, because I oftentimes notice like by the time I see something, it's 4 hours later or 5 hours later, right? And the token already pumped 2 or 3 times and the initial pump is done and people are taking out what they put in, right? And then you're just like serving for a short time as exit liquidity, so to speak.
Right. No, exactly. And I mean, at scale, this gets to the point where where the processing speed of your database is really going to matter as well. Right? Whether this is seconds or minutes, even will start to matter at some point.
Yes, and exactly. This is one of the biggest reasons why we want to raise at some point, because like if you, and we were discussing this a lot internally, whether just to keep it to ourselves and make a fund out of this, right, or actually make it a product. Because if you make it a fund, you can fudge a lot of things, right? It doesn't have to look perfect, et cetera, et cetera. The database doesn't have to be so fast as long as you have the rules running, right? But if you have a product that is now scaled to thousands or millions of people at some point, you need exactly these things, right? You need a super snappy backend. You need something that can run everything on the spot, no downtime, all these kind of things that become much, much more relevant as a product, as you productize something, right? And this is exactly why we need, we do need some money at some point, because we know how to build this out. In fact, my co-founder, he was the CTO of an $8 billion quant hedge fund in New York. So he did exactly all of this just for equities. But shit costs money, right? It's not going to get built by itself, and it takes time. So yes, 100% with you on that.
Yeah, no, I love it, and it seems like you and your co-founder have exactly the right backgrounds to be doing this as well, which is exciting. So I think we glad to have the conversation.
Exactly. Look, we always we do hope, of course, that we have the right background, right? But you know this yourself, right? Like background only matters so much. If you just sit at home, get baked, or trip on shrooms 24/7, you're not going to get anything done, right? So it's very important that you take advantage of the background, but then really work hard, right? Because I've seen a lot of projects with the right background where people fail because they don't have the as much drive, right, or hunger. So background is definitely one thing, but I think the hunger is what ultimately makes us win or not win.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it's lack of tenacity that kills most projects, right? Where they just break up or quit at the first sign of adversity, and especially in DeFi, because there are no consequences for doing so.
Exactly, right.
And that's
go on.
I say, when I was doing venture, we spent a lot of time, like we would spend a year or more most of the time getting to know founders, and that was why, right? It was because what you can't measure, based on questionnaires, based on background, based on interviews, and that kind of thing in a short period of time is tenacity. There's no way to measure that.
100% agreed with you, right? And I think what you said cannot be stressed enough. And this is, I think, a massive, massive problem right now we have in Web3 in general. Oftentimes what ends up happening, people raise way too much money than they need, right? Because there's just some very rough assumptions how much is actually going to be needed. And then the money gets thrown out to like fancy Art Basel parties and like ETH Denver and whatever, right? Instead of like actually staying focused and building something that is really generating true traction and then also generating true revenue at the end of the day, right? Like these are all businesses, whether it's, based on a token model where you have revenue share or equity where you pay out to shareholders ultimately becomes, somewhat similar, right? And I think this is a big, big problem where people have a lot of money, they run into issues, it doesn't work out exactly the way you want, and then kind of like, the project just sticks around and nothing happens, right? And this is what was a big reason for us why we essentially decided we're going to build first, show that we know how we can build stuff, right? And that this is going in the right direction. And with that, I think we hope at least that we can create much more confidence in what we're building than, a lot of ICOs or, TGEs, whatever you want to call them, starting with nothing but a fancy white paper, right? That, ChatGPT can generate for you at this point. You just need to proofread it, make sure that it's not spewing BS. So yeah, massive problem. I hear you on that one.
Yeah, definitely. So why don't we actually formally start the
Let's
AMA
do it, yes.
before we go any further? If anybody
it.
else wants to jump up on stage and chit chat with us, by the way, feel free to raise your hand and we'll let you up.
Yes.
But I want to get into the hard questions here. So anyway, so first of all, thank you all for attending another DeFi Raiders AMA. We're here with Jonathan from AlphaScan. I'm Degenic. And yeah, AlphaScan is I think we've probably given enough of it, but is a tool to scan for crypto alpha on steroids that will first focus on social analytics and then move to on-chain data. So before I start asking you, I want to get into the hard questions about like how you're going to do sentiment analysis and things like that. Because I think that that's more interesting. But give us if you would just a quick background of the team and how you all know each other and and why you decided to focus on this problem.
Yeah. So quickly, look, Peter is my co-founder. I met him very beginning of this year. He was actually working on something nearly identical as I was with my team, and we just vibed really well. We actually met through YC co-founder matching. So it was like an active effort to match with somebody and build. And so about his background quickly, so he's done 2 startups before, both exited. As I mentioned briefly, right, like before, he was also the CTO of a quant hedge fund in New York, 8 billion in assets. So he always tells me like if it's not time travel or teleportation, he can build it, right? And he can. he's pretty much like more, like in a lot of stuff, like he's a one-man show. We have another engineer from my team who does all the front end, but like he's running all of the back end right now, and he's just amazing to have on the team. And he's from Stanford originally in terms of education. Now myself, so I did a PhD in chemistry actually at Yale, then did management consulting, did 1 startup, scaled that, bootstrapped it to over 10 people, and then ended up co-founding AlphaScan. And so how I met my co-founder I mentioned, and then everybody else on the team, we're a small team, we have 3 other people, well, 2 other full-time, and 1, with design who's helping us out. We've all known each other from my previous startup. So we've worked together for about 2.5 years, 2 years. We've done this before, right? And so that I think is a big, big advantage for us as a team because there isn't much, hey, let's get to know each other. How are we working together? No, we know like what pace we're working at. We know how everybody else thinks. And I think it allows us, despite having a very small team and still being fully bootstrapped, to move pretty quickly because we have that understanding. And I love working with a team, by the way. I wouldn't want to switch anything for that. Like even if it wasn't this idea.
Yeah, very cool. That's the best way to do a business, right? Is to have the team and then worry about the idea.
Yep.
So very cool. So let's talk about social analytics in more detail. So this is still a hard problem that's not solved in marketing even, right? Sentiment analytics at any meaningful level of accuracy. So what and obviously that's going to be a core thing. You're going to have to be highly accurate, right, in order for this ultimately to work. So tell us more about your understanding of that and what technical approach you plan to take.
Yes, so I kind of want to push back a little bit on the highly accurate part because I'm trying to position AlphaScan not as a single source of truth for everything, just like one tool in a set of tools. But look, so the way we're looking at this is, as you're saying, it's an unsolved problem in a lot of spaces, and I don't expect that we're fully going to solve sentiment analytics, right, or on-chain analytics for that matter. I think we will be one key pillar in how to look at the market, but markets change, and if you don't change your approach with the markets, you're going to become irrelevant very fast, right? Not to call out names, but everybody is familiar with some of the analytics tools that were very big in the last bull run, and you know a lot of them are struggling right now because they did not change, they did not keep innovating, and they did not adjust to where the market is right now or kind of what the market is looking for, right? So I think that's a very, very important thing, because this is how we're building the platform, where in the long term we want to have a very composable or modular approach, where even, you know, kind of like doing with on-chain stuff, we'll have our own solution for that, but where you can build your own analytics using our raw data, right? Obviously, like an API is the far end of that, but even for non-engineers, etc., we want to have a solution where you can look at stuff yourself, right? Not just like eat what we're feeding through our, like, you know, screens or our charts. But one thing I think about this market that is very, very interesting and different to most other markets where people are actively trading is, I think the market is highly inefficient. And that is for a couple of reasons, right? Like even when you look on chain, I mean, like how LPs work, right? Like there's massive slippage, there's massive issues with like front running. There's so many issues out there, right? And we only suck it up because there's a very high return despite all of this stuff, right? And I think the same thing is happening with sentiment. When, you know, like you have influencers on Twitter, on YouTube, on you name the platform, talking about stuff, and all of a sudden these tokens start to move very fast, right? And every, you know, like a few years back, even in 2017, if anybody was around, it was like McAfee. McAfee would post about something, then a token at the height of like 2018, the token went up 3x in literally no time, right? It was botted to death, right? Then in the last bull run, you had more and more like of an established set of influencers, and these things kind of keep evolving, but this market still has this kind of inefficiency, right? And I think this is where the premise of AlphaScan comes in, that if you know how to listen to the market, right, you can actually perform better than, let's say, just Bitcoin or ETH, right? Because the market is still so inefficient. I do fully expect that once this market becomes more mature, some of this stuff is going to disappear. Also because, you know, we're oftentimes talking about tokens that have a market cap, you know, I mean, you were talking about it like super, super early, right? Like 20, 30,000, 50,000 USD. But even if you're looking at like a 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 million market cap token, it's still, right, like very, you can move that pretty quickly, right? Like with the right support behind that. And so this is kind of what we're tapping into, right? And I think over the next years, again, it's going to change. But this is a huge, huge thing that when we started back testing just a little bit of raw data, we started seeing a lot of signal, right? And then there's actually how AlphaScan came about. I wasn't initially necessarily planning to build a tool out of this. It was more for me and myself and my team to understand like how we're buying and selling stuff. And, you know, because we're in a couple of alpha chats, we just started sharing some of these things, right? Like in calls, on Telegram, Discord, you name it. And a lot of people came back and they were like, hey man, can you just like send me the data? I would love to have a look. And before we knew it, right, being builders by heart, we were like, you know what, this is actually interesting enough. Let's just put this like on our website or so, right? And so this is kind of where we are right now with AlphaScan. We're very focused on the sentiment part right now because we should get way more interest from that than we thought. We have like you know, we started our Twitter, like 2 months ago, 1.5 months ago, and it started growing pretty nicely. And similarly, our waitlist, I think, is like close to 10,000 people right now, or wallets. So we were getting very, very good interest for this tool, and I'm confident that once a little bit further down the road, we'll have some very good stuff in there for people to discover. Actually, it's kind of getting there now. Now, you asked also the part how we're doing it technically, right? And, you know, this can be a very longer question. Maybe you want to ask them more specific, but just on a high level, we actually, with the issues at Twitter, are building out a backend that has a couple of redundancies, how we can get the data, right? So we want to get the data programmatically through services, etc. But we also build out our own internal mechanism, which we're using right now, where we manually put in the content of the tweets, right? And then we manually actually curate the data to make sure that, you know, we're not going to catch everything, but it's all literally manually curated. Every morning we sit there for like 2 hours and sift through the data, right, and update that. So right now it's quite manual, but we have ways of doing this much, much more programmatically, especially once we start scaling, right? We are a big fan of, you know, do things that don't scale to get to product market fit.
Yeah, very cool. And it sounds like it will be modular enough or open enough that someone could come along and you know, build their own data schema on, you know, on top of yours, sucking yours in, right?
Yes, 100%. So two things that I can mention here. Actually, last week, I think we retweeted this. Somebody came on our Discord and asked if we have an API, and we don't have one yet. So they just like scraped our website and then ran their own regression analysis, right? Like for something. I think like just like to look at like size, account size versus performance, something like that, right? So that was super cool to see that people are even at this stage already interested in the data. So we want to have a solution where people can do this through our tool. It might look something like in the direction of Dune, right? Just with other data points. It might be a little bit more like some of the other analytics tools, maybe like Glassnode or such, where you can just like, do some simple calculations, some basic formulas without needing to use something like SQL, right? So we'll have a solution there where people can come in and run their own analytics. Now, the other part, of course, for more professional developers and such, or actually hedge funds, we already have a couple of interested ones. We will have an API where you can just like get a full fire hose of the raw data, and then you can like put this into like your own AI model or your own trading solution. Whatever you have, you can do it then.
Yeah, very cool. I'm excited to try to plug this into Apache NiFi. This will be my reason to finally learn that.
Nice.
So good. So after social, then you're going to move on to the data engine, and you're planning to do that in a way that will provide block level pricing data and things like that, versus TWAP or aggregated data. What's your approach? What approach are you planning to take to that?
Yeah, so we have this built out actually. It's turned off right now, but we already have like exactly as you said, like a block level pricing engine built out for all, for Uniswap V2 and V3, right? So anything that's a fork of that, we can already support, and we have this across 6 chains, I think. Now, the reason why we turned this off right now is because for $50 we can get a premium API from like CoinGecko, for example, and we can get the data to test out what we have. If we're running our own backend, it costs us thousands of dollars just to have this like constantly live updated, and it's generating, as you can imagine, right, like a lot of data. So exactly as you say, this is going to be the case in the future. We have it built out, but again, we want to get like this costs a lot of money, right? And we have right now a tool that is available for free, and we have to be a little bit cautious of cost. So at some point in the future, after a raise, we might have some premium features at some point. We'll have exactly this kind of data available on the pricing side. And then on the on-chain side, we also have a proof of concept built out, again, turned off at this point because it's a lot of data, and like you can index a couple of thousands of wallets, let's say a few million transactions or so. But to really scale that up, you need a massive backend, right? Kind of what you said in the beginning, it needs to be extremely snappy, right? It requires quite a lot of work, but then B, also you need to have serious usage there, right? Because if you don't have it, then again, you're paying, I don't know, like $10,000, $15,000 in AWS costs per month just to have all of this running without it being used. So yes, I'm very excited about this stuff, but we'll have, some of these features live in a few months. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, very cool. Looking forward to those. So let's see, where should we go next?
Yeah, is there anything about this? Otherwise, one thing we can also talk a little bit, and this is what you were saying, what you were indicating to earlier. We could talk a little bit like how people are finding, and especially because this is a smaller group, I think if others want to chat as well, I would love to hear that, like how people are finding Alpha right now, and also how we're thinking about using that, how we're using AlphaScan essentially to, speed up that process, if you will.
Yeah, I think right. That was the best part of this. Yeah, let's good idea. Any of you guys want to hop up on stage? Relentless, VWit, Hodl?
Cool. Well, one thing I can say in the meantime, while people are still listening, and I think we spoke about this very briefly earlier, right? Like the reason why we started building AlphaScan is because I've seen this in a couple of iterations of bull markets, right? Like 2017, 2021. And now I think it's going to happen even stronger, where whatever is being discussed in certain channels, whether it's Telegram, Discord, right, some of these private ones, or more public ones like Twitter, YouTube, etc., is going to drive adoption is going to drive prices, right? Even just think, it's essentially marketing, right? Like the only difference, we have a token there now attached to it as well, right? But like if you have 10 different, perp exchanges all running on Arbitrum, you don't need 10, right? It's probably going to be a winner of 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, right? How is that going to be a winner? Well, whoever has the best marketing engine, assuming the product is similar, right? And I think the same thing applies for the token then, right? Obviously, the token in the long term will need things to make it survive, right? Like a real utility, a real product, etc. But especially at the earlier stages, when teams are still building, a lot of the price is driven by, right, like early believers, speculation, etc. And I think this is something that I feel quite confident we can tap into by looking at the data the right way.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you don't even need necessarily to be very accurate about sentiment so long as you're tracking volume, because volume is significantly determinative, right, of a lot of this.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Relentless, welcome to the stage.
Hey.
Yo, what's up? Hey, Jonathan. Good to have you on here.
Hey, good talking to you again, man.
Yeah, sorry. I've been listening as I can. I'm a little bit busy right now. Got something coming up here in a little bit, and just working. But one question I wanted to kind of ask you is what traction have you seen since you guys have released the test net? What kind of activity are you guys seeing on there?
Yes, I briefly mentioned this. So we, so keep in mind, right? Like my co-founder and I, we met each other 3 months ago, right? So and we had pretty much nothing on our hands back then, right? And then a month and a half, 2 months ago, we started with our Twitter. And so where we are right now, the Twitter stuff is obviously public, right? Like we have about 5,000 people who are like behind the Twitter right now or following it. We have a wait list right now that is probably twice as large as that. Maybe like 7,000, something like that. I don't know the latest number, but there's been significant interest in people trying out the product. We've also already had, I don't know the exact numbers, but maybe like 1,500 people or so like in the tool. So we've seen some good, like early indication, and especially the reason why this is interesting for us is because we want to, we need to get user feedback, right? Like we need to test the features ourselves. We need to see that stuff is working or where stuff is breaking, and that only happens when people try out the product, right? So we've seen like in our Discord, for example, as well, really good, like, people comments about feedback, feature requests. I think in the first week when we put the feature out and shared it with a couple of friends, we got like 50 different feature requests, right? Or like kind of improvements, etc. So far we've been honestly almost overwhelmed because we're a very small team to do all of this. But I'm very excited about where things are going. I also think, by the way, and I keep talking to, we internally discuss this a lot as well, right? Inherently, AlphaScan is a bull market tool, right? Because it helps you outpace the market, right? Like that's really the vision that we want to provide here. If the market's going down, right, like it's going to be very tough to, use this on a daily basis, because if you're not buying, then you don't need necessarily to track sentiment like on a 1 hour by hour basis, right? So I think for us, what we're very keen on doing is we want to get to a product that is really ready for prime time before kind of the next mini bull run, if you will, right? And I think this could happen actually like in not too long, in a few months or even a few weeks already. So we're very, very heads down right now to get the product to that level, because that's when I think all the people who've been waiting can come in and try out the product. And that's when, look, my plan, I'm going to be massively disappointed if the next mini bull run comes and AlphaScan is not ready for me to provide, to do the analytics I want, right? So we've been seeing really, really good engagement, really good early adoption. And I think in a few weeks when the product is more out, we really want to double down on that.
Nice, very cool. And then another thing that I was thinking about, and someone had mentioned to me previously, and I think I chatted with you a little bit about it in chat, was just the ability to not just track what they talked about, but are you guys going to be providing the links to what they tweeted when they talked about the token?
Yes. So we will have
Perfect.
that. We have actually, I need to check. Julius, the other guy on my team, he posted on Twitter something today, on our AlphaScan Twitter. We have now, I think, like, when you look at, so we released like the view by tokens, And so we essentially, like cut the data the opposite way. Instead of cutting it by influencer, we cutting it by token, and then you see who talks about when. And I'm pretty sure that in there you can already click on an image and it opens the tweet directly. So I'm pretty confident we have that. Now we will have more even in our tool, right? Like, because we will have, for example, right now, what I mentioned earlier, a lot of the sentiment analytics and review is very manual, right? Also because we want to understand the data better, but obviously we're going to do a lot of that programmatically, especially the sentiment part. So we will then provide also more tweet level analytics within our tool, right? But right now, I'm pretty confident you can already click out in some of the views and get the actual tweet of what we're mentioning or what we're like capturing.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to click a little bit more through it. I know the last thing that I saw when I was clicking through was it takes you to CoinGecko links.
Yes.
I didn't see any of the tweets.
Yeah, for the tokens, exactly, right? Like when you're looking at a token. So there's a third on the left in the sidebar. We now have like 3 icons, and one of them is like view by token, the last one. And there you should be, I'm pretty confident you should be able to get into a tweet directly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's accurate. Cool.
Yeah.
I looked right past that. I was on the Explore Tweets page thinking that, that was the one.
Yeah, exactly. So that feature is like literally 3 days out, something like that.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Awesome. Well, I mean, I'm excited for you guys. I appreciate your time. That's all I had. I appreciate you bringing me up on stage.
Dude, great talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Relentless. And that makes me instantly think of, could you tease out the difference in how contract addresses are presented in tweets, right? Whether it's just a contract address or it's a contract address inside of a Dex Screener or Dex Tools link. I would be very interested to know if the, right, if I were to check, amongst the people I'm following, right, how many of the just contract address posts are because there isn't a liquidity pool yet?
That's a really interesting question. And so the tweets that we're capturing right now, I can tell you in most cases, and again, I don't have a hard number, but I look at the data every day because we're doing a lot of it still manual. If you see actually anything related to the contract or the address, the contract address, you're going to see the Dex Screener or Dex Tools link. It's less likely that you're just going to see the address itself. Now, the caveat that I will say here, though, is we're not yet tracking the full set of accounts that we want to track, right? So the data is on that part still a little bit limited. The other thing also is most of the stuff that we capture is actually more like hashtag or hashtag based, right? Because these are tokens that are already like a tiny bit more established. And then the other thing that we see is we also see, like the Twitter accounts being mentioned, right? Like from the actual project. So I think, yeah, that's kind of how I would like expect what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? And it's funny that projects continue to launch with names that are too long to cache tag.
Yeah.
Cool. So why don't we move into plan for governance and do you plan to decentralize governance in the long term and then tokenomics as well and then roadmap and kind of upcoming community or marketing stuff.
Yeah. So quickly, look, I think we do have plans for decentralizations. They're currently we're working on them, right? But we'll have more information out in the coming weeks. I think just a few things on a high level, right? Like what the exact numbers are is a little bit up for discussion still, right? But I think there's a few fundamental pillars that I want to see in a project if I'm an investor, not even like me building it, right? The first part is I think it's absolutely crucial that there's absolute transparency with what's happening, right? And there's a couple of issues that we've seen in the past. I mean, even if anybody was following this whole bullshit with like the Ben token or whatever, right? Like where the guy's like, oh, I'm not locking it up, like I'm not a scammer, and then 2 days later he does it, right? So there's just some of this stuff where like you need the right transparency, you need the right things to be done by the team to create the trust, right? So I think this is one thing that we want to make sure we do from day one. The other thing also is, I think we are not a project that's looking for backing of like $20 million from VCs and insiders, right? And then there's a token launch and like extremely favorable allocations, and then retail is used as exit liquidity. I think people are much more wary of these kind of projects, right? Especially because everything is publicly available, and at this point, people know who are the better actors and who are the worst actors. So I think for us, from a tokenomics perspective, probably about 2/3 or more is going to go, essentially to the community through various ways, right? Like incentives, treasury. There's a couple of ways, like public sale, etc. But I'm opposed to something where, for example, if you take like the team allocation, the advisor allocation, the private sale allocation, and that ends up being like 60% or something like that, right? I think that doesn't look right on how the token is incentivized, right? So that's another big part. And then the third one is, of course, there will be decentralized governance, right? Like I think fundamentally, like if you don't have that, then don't decentralize, right? I think in terms of the content, the way we want to provide it, there's going to be a massive decentralization aspect, not just like blockchain, but even where it's coming from, right? Like different sources, different ways of getting it. And I think there's a lot of overlap in how we're structuring everything. But we do want to have input from everybody, right? And like I think I've mentioned this before. Like we have honestly 2 channels right now that are really relevant in our Discord apart from like announcement or so, right? Like one is just like a general chat, and the other one is the feedback, right? We want to hear from everybody from the beginning, and like I've built a startup before. My co-founders built a startup before. You have to listen to people. If you want to build something. If you're not doing that, then it's not going to work out, right? So we want to reflect that in the governance. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that at the end of the day, right, like we're building the product, and for example, like it doesn't make sense to decentralize certain decision makings, right? Like what kind of infrastructure to use. And there's some basic things that obviously shouldn't be decentralized. But I think where the product is going in the future is 100% going to be fully decentralized, because, like I do believe that in this space, in the long run, the masses are more right than wrong, right? And we want to showcase this in how the token is structured, how the governance is structured, and kind of what I spoke about earlier in the product, also what people can do with the data, right? Where they can actually build their own stuff. So yes, big fan of decentralization, but details on that will be out in a few weeks probably. In terms of roadmap, look, we have right now the sentiment thing, which has become actually much more interesting than we expected. We thought we would be more focused on on-chain from the beginning, but sentiment is too interesting right now to let go. So we're very heavily focused on that. We're going to keep improving and keep building in that area. At the same time, we will start integrating features like alerts, right, that ultimately lead to the DeFi solution. Because I'm personally very interested in actually like automating. I mean, you mentioned this, right? Like even in the beginning to kind of automate some of this trading. So that's going to be somewhere in the nearer future coming up as well. And then in parallel, we'll be doing the on-chain stuff, right? And then the reason why we're doing the on-chain stuff, because ultimately we still actually will have a massive AI model in the back end that takes all of this data, on-chain Twitter or on-chain sentiment, etc., puts it in and kind of corroborates or gives additional, insights into a possible buy or sell, right? So that's kind of how we're looking at the roadmap over the next, let's say 12 months.
Yeah, very cool. Makes a lot of sense. And I love that you highlight the problem with distributing governance tokens.
Yeah. And look, we haven't even spoken about the biggest part, which is regulation, right? So that's, a big one that we have to be mindful of as well, because, I have zero desire of going against something that is ultimately not helpful for anyone.
Oh, perfect. You reminded me. I almost forgot to ask. So, right, you're two doxed US-based founders doing a token.
Yes. Exactly. Let's leave it at that. Next question.
Fair enough. I think I tend to agree with that approach.
Yeah.
Oh, hilarious, though. Yeah, excellent. So I see you're going to issue the token in part as rewards for users who create content that the community finds valuable. So I think that's really cool, because that makes this a platform that hopefully generates an active community of builders, not just users, which creates more value for everybody. So so how So how, what's your approach to that? Just some kind of voting mechanism?
Yeah, no, what you said is exactly right. That we want to. I think a larger user base in the long run with the right tools is going to be way smarter than like a group of 10, startup people in finding signals or building, like analytics that provide signal, right? So we're looking to tap into that and provide users with the right solutions, right? And kind of like on the solution side, I mentioned already, right? Like it's going to be around like APIs, right? Or even more like an integrated solution where my vision is that you come into the tool, you get kind of like the standard features that we provide, but then it's kind of like on Reddit, right? Okay, what are you a fan of? Here are like 20 subreddits you can start following, right? And we want to have exactly this kind of the same structure where you have, different kind of, let's say, charts, different kind of analyses that users have built out, and you can essentially leverage that for your own benefit, right? And then of course the token is going to be structured in such a way that incentivizes users building the right stuff, right? So obviously, like all of this stuff is very easily tracked, right? Like for example, you can imagine like dashboards and people subscribing to them, right? The more subscribers you have, the more incentives you receive, right? And so we're very, very heavily on focus on building something out like that, because I think that to be a tool of relevance for more than one bull market, you have to become as modular as you can. Otherwise, you will be left behind, because there's going to be a new set of players. There's going to be a new set of rules how this space is working, and you're going to be too slow or too just complacent at some point as a team in doing this, right? So you have to like really go hard on the platform play. So that's our focus on this. TBD exactly on the timing there, right? It obviously brings in a whole new set of features that we will have to build out first, right? But I think having the right backend with the right data is going to be the starting point, and then obviously the API is the quick fix, let's say, for that, and then a more integrated solution through AlphaScan is going to be the longer solution here.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Actually, it brings me back to something you said earlier, that this is primarily a tool for bull markets. I wonder, and I'm curious, what you think about the viability of this. But could you do the same thing for short signals?
Probably yes. So we haven't really. So it's funny that you asked this, because one of the guys who I follow, who's like a good trader, he said, if we were all as good at finding our exit point as our entry point, we would all be millionaires, right? It's way harder to leave a market that is going up than to buy something, right? When we feel bullish on something. Having said all of this, I do think so, right? Kind of like what you said already. You could see this like with meme coin season. This is why we want to provide a little bit more like narrative analytics. At some point, everything becomes so overheated, right? And everybody's talking about meme coins. And like there's like hundreds of meme coins launching with one narrative better than the other, right? Like why this meme coin has to survive. I think these kind of things are clear signs that the market is becoming a little overheated, right? Like almost something like you have like the fear and greed and fear index, right? Or you have like, is it altcoin versus Bitcoin season, right? Like there's some of these indices that are already quite helpful for us to grasp or understand where the market is. And I do think that in half a year and a year, when we have more data, right, when we have more users on the platform, we'll be able to build out some of these signals and then also improve the accuracy, right? Because there's a bit of an iterative process.
Yeah, very cool. Looking forward to seeing it, and looking forward to building. I feel like this is a natural for us to build a private dashboard off of for our server, right, for Raiders.
That's exactly. We've had, like I've mentioned this before talking to Relentless too, like we've gotten quite a bit of interest from alpha groups exactly because that's what they want to do, right? They want to start building their own dashboards or having their own analytics and share it with a few people, but not necessarily share it with the broader public, right? And for us as a tool, that's a very interesting thing, right? Because we can have the fully decentralized solution, be also coupled with a token, etc. But then, of course, you can have a more private solution, right? Where people essentially are paying premium for a private solution, right? Just like on GitHub, you can have private and public repositories, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great business model, because ideally you'll get, people supporting the core of the platform as well as building, private services that, that add value to them and their friend group or
Exactly.
user group.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. Well, good. I think
Cool.
I think we've probably covered everything at this point.
I think so too. Yeah. Hey, this was super interesting. Actually, like completely. First off, thanks a lot for the invite. It was great talking. I would love to connect with you guys at some point and talk a little bit more about AlphaScan, because I think you said a lot of stuff in the beginning that is exactly what we have in mind, and just like picking your brain, getting your feedback, what you like, what you don't like, would be terribly useful to us.
Yeah, no, happy to. DM me in Discord is probably the easiest way to reach me.
Perfect.
Relentless can introduce us.
Yeah, exactly. I'm connected with him already on Discord, so I'll follow up then. Guys, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the time. And yeah, we'll be in touch soon then.
Yeah, great to meet you, Jonathan. Thanks so much. This was really a pleasure, and this has been another DeFi Raiders AMA. We've been here with AlphaScan, and yeah, this has been a pleasure. If you're seeing this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Help other people see this great content. And yeah, love to talk more, and yeah, love to work together.